You are going to that place whether you want to or not. He stood by the dining room window with his arms folded like he was waiting for me to cry or fall to my knees and beg. But I did nothing. I did not move or speak. I only watched him and wondered quietly if this was truly the son I raised, the same boy I cared for with tired, hurting arms, the one who held on to my robe when nightmares scared him. How does a loving heart turn so icy? I stayed quiet, not because I had no words, but because if I opened my mouth, my whole spirit would spill out. He let out a small, angry breath, annoyed by my silence, and said he could not keep helping me, that I was making his life harder, that his wife was worn out, that this was not a real life for anyone. Like I was a heavy load, an old bill, or a dusty box taking space. He said all of this with a calm voice that hurt more than shouting, and I kept thinking, what did I ever do to deserve this? But no one truly knows what a mother hides in her heart. I walked to the kitchen like everything was normal. I heated water and made coffee, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from the strength it took not to cry. I sat at the table and took a slow sip from my warm mug. Then I heard his voice in the next room, talking on the phone. He said the care home had a room ready. He said he would handle it all, and that it would be finished in 2 days. 2 days. That is how quickly I can be pushed away. I held the edge of my mug, remembering the years, the good ones, the hard ones, the nights I ate less so he could eat more, the nights I stayed awake helping his asthma, his fears, and his shadows. All of it, every bit I gave, now turned into a choice made without my voice. I knew this day was coming, maybe not in this way, but I felt it, in the way Marcus looked at me for months, like I bothered him even when he breathed. I saw it at meals, when we barely talked, and how he shut his door when I walked by, and how his wife treated me like a guest who almost had to leave. And that one sentence he said was the final hurt. When he walked back into the kitchen, I had already finished my coffee. I asked him quietly if he wanted me to make him dinner. He looked confused. Maybe he expected a different reaction. Maybe he wanted to see me on my knees, yelling and begging. But I was not that woman anymore. I did not make him anything. I went to my room, closed the door carefully, sat on the bed, and right there, in that moment, in the middle of the night that was just starting, I decided that if anyone was going to make choices about my life, that person was going to be me. Marcus does not know who I really am, or who I used to be, or everything it took me to get here. He conveniently forgets that I had a life before being his mother, that I was not born weak or old or tired, that I once dreamed, that I danced in the rain, that I loved freely, that my heart was broken and that I started over, and that I built everything he now wants to take away. He forgets that this house does not belong to him, that I raised it with my own hands. I worked 30 years as the manager of a local bakery, working 6 days a week just to pay for every brick, every window, every flower in the yard. I only slept 4 hours a night. I never asked for anything, not even thanks. But of course, memory is selective when convenient. I did not sleep that night. I lay looking at the ceiling, remembering every detail of my life. The first day I saw this land, when it was just dirt and hope. The day I brought newborn Marcus home, wrapped in a yellow blanket. The Christmases, the laughter, the fights, the makeups, everything stored inside these walls. And now he wanted to put me in a home, like I was a prisoner. I did not cry, not because it did not hurt, but because I would not give him my tears. The next morning, I woke up before everyone. I made breakfast, as always. Marcus came down with his usual look, that mix of hurry and distance. He said he had to go out to handle paperwork and we would talk later. I nodded. When he left, I went to the closet, not to pack clothes, not yet. I went for something else. A small dark wooden box I had kept for years. Inside were my most important papers, deeds, my will, some savings nobody knew about. Not a lot, but enough. Also letters, photographs, old clippings. I sat on the bed with the box on my lap, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled. He thinks I am weak. He thinks he can make decisions for me, but he has no idea what I have gone through and what I am capable of. I closed the box and put it back. I had to act calm, smartly. It was not time to show my hand yet, but the game had begun, and this time the one moving the pieces would be me. That night, I pretended to be tired. I went to bed early, and from my room, I listened to Marcus talking to his wife. They were saying the place was nice, that it had a garden, that it was well kept. Like they were talking about a fancy hotel. Like a mother was just an object to put quietly on a shelf. I pulled the blanket up to my neck, not for warmth, but to guard myself from their cold thoughts. The idea of leaving no longer hurt. What hurt was that they believed they could decide everything without me. But they would learn soon, because the next week was going to change all things. And this time, the final choice would be me. I remember the exact day Marcus was born. It felt like the sky knew something important was starting. The doctor said he took a deep breath right away, like he wanted the whole world in his first cry. And I, silly me, believed it meant strength and hope. I never imagined it was also a sign from when he was small. Marcus was a demanding child, one who cried not from hunger, but for wanting more, who was not happy with what he had, but wanted what was not his. But I, with the blind love of a first-time mother, tried to please him. I worked extra hours running my sewing business to buy him the designer shoes all the neighborhood kids wanted. I went into debt to get him a spot at the private academy, thinking it would protect him from bad paths and bad company. I swallowed my tears and gave up sleep just to help him move forward. When his father, my husband, Robert, died, Marcus was only 15. It was painful for both of us, but what hurt me most was not the grief. It was how Marcus started looking at me like I suddenly knew nothing. Like he, with his changing voice and growing shoulders, was the man of the house, and I was just a fading shape. One night while I was holding Robert's pillow, he said, "Don't cry so much, Mom. He had to die of something." From then on, everything shifted. He stopped asking me anything. He left the house without saying where. He spoke to me like a servant, a weight, an annoyance. But even then, I kept excusing him. It's just his age, I told myself. He's hurting from losing his father. And I kept cooking his favorite meals, washing his clothes, hoping for the day he would hug me like he used to. But that hug never returned. The years passed. Marcus grew, became a business executive, got a strong job in the city, and moved out. I stayed in this home that we built with so much sacrifice, brick by brick, when Robert was alive. Every corner holding a memory, a story, a hurt. I thought when Marcus settled in life, he would visit, not to live, but to share a cup of coffee, to ask how I was doing. But the calls became rare, the messages stopped, and when he did come, it was rushed. He barely said hello, checked his watch, and left. But what hurt the most was not the distance. It was how he looked at the house like someone measuring what they would take once the owner was gone. One day, without warning, he told me, "Mom, you should think about selling this house. The house is getting old and you can't keep it up alone." He said it without looking at me, as if it meant nothing to him, as if he did not know this house was the last thing I had of Robert, of our story, of myself. I stayed silent, nodded, and poured him more coffee. After that, the pressure began. Calls every week. Mom, did you go to the notary yet? Mom, I know someone who wants to invest in property. Mom, this is for your good. And every time I hung up, I felt a piece of me tear away, like a flower pulled from its stem. I held on to my routine, my garden, my sewing, my quiet walks. But the shadow of his ambition filled every corner of my home. Every time I opened a drawer, it felt like getting ready to vanish. Until one afternoon, while watering the roses, I saw him arrive with his new car, his office suit, his expensive cologne, and his unkind, serious face. And he said, I already talked to Attorney Sterling. Deeds and payment receipts. I found old records, deeds. Even the letter where Robert said the house would always be mine unconditionally. Weeks passed. Marcus did not call, which was fine. I stayed quiet because sometimes the greatest act of rebellion is silence. Until a month later, he came back with his arrogant tone, his rush. Mom, I have made the decision for you. You are going to the facility, whether you want to or not. And that was when I knew it. It was not just ambition, it was contempt. And that was the last straw. I came home that afternoon with my throat tight like I had swallowed a rock. There was something in the air, something that was not new, but thicker, more visible, like a fog that did not bother to hide. It was contempt. Marcus's contempt. My own son's. I felt it in the plates he left on the table without cleaning, in the way his voice got louder every time he spoke, in the way he avoided looking at me as if I were nothing. That night was different, because he did not yell or throw anything or insult me directly. It was worse. He just sat across from me in the dining room while I finished dinner. He looked at me in silence with the calm that froze my blood. I have already spoken to Mr. Dawson, he said suddenly, cutting his meat without looking up. Everything is ready. This house will be in my name, and you are going to the facility whether you want to or not. I did not respond. Not a sigh, not a tear. I took my napkin and placed it on my lap as slowly as always. I felt something inside me shrink, as if my soul was curling up in fear. But I said nothing, because in that silence, I was also deciding. I did not sleep that night. I walked the hallway from one end to the other, shadows stretching along the walls like the house itself was watching me. How did we get here? I wondered. When did my son become someone who could look at his mother like she was a nuisance? But questions were not enough. The next day, I began something I had not done in years. I started writing. I took an old notebook and began noting dates, names, facts. Like my life was a file that needed checking. I remembered the original deed to the house, the documents locked in a box deep in my closet. And I remembered something else. I had not signed anything yet. That transfer had not happened. Legally, the house was still mine. And if he thought I would hand it over like an old rag, he did not know me well enough. I started small. I sold some antique silverware I had inherited from my mother. Then I sold some jewelry that had been hidden for decades. All in silence, all without anyone noticing. Marcus thought I was still the quiet, obedient woman who washed his clothes and made his breakfast without complaint. But no, not anymore. The day before his next visit with the attorney, I heard him talking on the patio phone. He did not know I was behind the curtain listening. Yeah, everything is set, he said. The old lady says nothing. She just cooks and walks around like a ghost. No problem, we will sign in a week and I can start renovations. I am going to gut the whole kitchen. I did not cry, but that phrase, the old lady, that is what he called me. Not mom, not mother, not the woman who gave him life, just the old lady. And right at that moment, I knew there was no more time to waste. I had to protect the small part of me that was left. the part he could not destroy. I got up early the next day and went to the bank. I opened a new account under a different name. I took precautions I had never taken before. I changed passwords, saved copies of important documents in separate places, and reread the house deed line by line, like it was a tragic story. And in that rereading, I found something I had forgotten, a clause that let me cancel any change if I proved coercion or abuse. I guarded that page as if it were gold. The humiliations continued. Marcus never tired. Every day he found a new way to make me feel small. Sometimes he ignored me. Other times he would come in with grocery bags and drop them hard on the table, as if I were an employee. Not a word, just orders, just cutting commands. One night, when the tension was thick like you could slice it, I made his favorite meal, smothered pork chops and rice, just like when he was a boy. I foolishly thought that tasting it might make him remember something, some happy moment, some hug from the days when he was small and safe in my skirt. But no, he took a bite, tasted it once, and said with disdain, "This is bland, just like you." I froze, not because of the words, but because in his tone there was no anger anymore. It was total, complete indifference, as if I no longer existed. And that was when I decided I could not go through this alone. I thought of someone, the only person who always spoke kindly to me when we ran into each other at the market, even though it had been years. Serena Hayes, the neighbor down the street, the one who cared for her sick mother until her last breath, the one who offered me help more than once when she saw me carrying bags alone. We were not close, but there was a light in her that made me feel there was still something good left in the world. I went to find her. I walked to her house with my heart in my throat, and when she opened the door, hair tied back, apron covered in flowers, I simply said, "I need to talk, and I don't know who else to turn to." She let me in without asking anything. I sat in her kitchen smelling fresh bread, and I told her everything. Every word, every invisible blow, every night of silence, every act of contempt. Serena listened without interrupting. She did not offer empty comfort. She just held my hand. When I finished and said something that still echoes in my mind, "You are not alone, and you don't have to give your life to someone who doesn't value it." That day, something changed in me. I returned home a different person, no longer walking hunched or with slumped shoulders. I felt like for the first time in years, I had a plan, a real plan, my own plan. And Marcus noticed. He looked at me with narrowed eyes like he suspected something, but he said nothing. He just frowned and went back to his phone. I smiled because I knew his time was running out and mine was just beginning. Serena kept her word. She didn't only listen that first time. She started visiting often, quietly, as if she knew any whisper in this house could become explosive. She brought me homemade bread sometimes, just sat with me on the patio watching the leaves fall, and little by little became a constant presence, a companionship that needed few words. Her way of just being there was a relief in all the shadow. One afternoon, while we prepared strong black coffee together, she looked at me with calm eyes and said something that startled me. "Thelma, if you decide to leave, I will help you go anywhere you choose. You don't need to tell me when. Just tell me you are ready to do it." I did not respond right away. I just watched the steam rise from the pot like it carried my thoughts. But inside, something bright was starting. For the first time in years, I felt like I could not only run, but that I could start my life again. That night, alone in my room, I opened the drawer where I kept important papers. I pulled out the house deed and stared at it for a long time. There was my name in dark ink, Thelma Price. It was mine. Everything was still correct. I had not given anything away, not yet, and I wouldn't. I started gathering what I needed to disappear: documents, some money. I withdrew slowly without making him suspicious. My birth certificate, bank books, and an old gold chain for my grandmother. I hid everything inside an empty cookie tin under a false bottom in the dresser. Nobody would know. Meanwhile, I acted normal, setting the table, cooking with no joy but with no mistakes. Marcus stayed distracted, focused on calls, on his business plans, on the renovations he dreamed of for a house not even his yet. But then I noticed something that disturbed me. He was watching me. Sometimes he walked into my room without knocking, pretending he needed a pen or wanted to know if I saw his keys. He stayed a few seconds too long, like he was searching for something. His eyes scanned my drawers, my shelves. He was hunting for proof. He didn't know what proof, but I felt observed. So I became more careful. I memorized where everything was and took photos with my old phone in case someone moved anything. Every move needed planning. Every word needed control. Then Serena offered a possibility I never imagined. My cousin lives near Asheville, North Carolina. She has a quiet, small place. She doesn't ask questions. Maybe you could start there. I stayed quiet. The name Asheville echoed inside me, not as a place, but as a promise. A new air, a new Thelma. And how will I get there? I asked softly. I will drive you, she said without a second thought. That is when we decided the escape needed to be exact, fast, with no space for mistakes. The plan formed one Friday morning when Marcus was at his weekly meeting with Attorney Starling. I feel something strange happening. I want to make sure you are not signing anything without telling me. The irony is brutal. He who planned to take the house from me is worried about me doing something strange. I don't have anything to sign, Marcus. You know I don't handle those things anymore. I lied. His gaze pierced me, but he did not press it. Then 2 days before my planned exit, something unexpected happened, a minor accident. I was putting the last papers back in my hidden box when a receipt fell to the floor. Marcus walked in at that moment and saw it before I could pick it up. He grabbed it. It was for the sale of an antique figure. It did not have my name, but it had a delivery address. "What is this?" he asked. "It is from a long time ago. I found it in a box." "It is nothing," I replied, my heart pounding in my throat. He watched me for seconds that felt like forever. Then he put the paper on the table and left without saying another word. But he did not sleep at home that night. Serena called me as soon as she found out. "We are moving it up. We cannot risk it." And so it was. The day before the planned departure, I packed my things, a single suitcase. I left a letter on the dining room table under a vase. It was not a fond farewell. It was a declaration. I explained that the house is not his, that I have not signed anything, that he no longer has my permission or my silence. "Everything you destroyed in this house," I wrote, "cannot be fixed with new walls, and now that I am leaving, you will finally understand a mother's presence is worth more than any money." That was my final sentence. I did not sign "with love." I just put my name, Thelma Price. When Serena came for me, I did not cry. I closed the door firmly. I did not look back. The sky was covered with thick clouds, but I felt something like the sun on my skin. Freedom. We drove away in her car, without music. The road was long, but for the first time in years, I did not care where I was going. I only knew I would not be returning, and the monster I raised would have to learn to live without me. The car moved slowly along the back road, flanked by tall trees, swaying with gentle wind. Serena kept both hands steady on the steering wheel, and I gazed out the window as if life was passing by for the first time. The house was behind me. Marcus was behind me. And behind me was that broken version of myself that endured too much. Neither of us spoke. Sometimes silence does not need to be filled. Mine was crowded with images, with phrases I never said, with cries I choked down for years. Serena's, I believe, was the silence of someone who understood the weight of what was being left behind. As we drove toward the horizon, in that house I left intact like an empty shell, Marcus returned to his golden prison. He parked his car on the driveway without noticing anything strange. He walked in talking on the phone with that sharp voice he used to close deals that were never what he said. He crossed the living room without seeing the vase or the letter underneath. He poured himself a glass of water, kicked his shoes into a corner, and slumped into the armchair. It was then that something hit him. The silence. A different kind of silence. Not the usual. Not a mother quiet out of habit. It was heavier, deeper, a void, an echo. He got up and walked through the house. He called my name 2, 3 times. Nothing. He went upstairs and found the bedroom empty, not messy, not ransacked, just empty, as if the soul had departed. He came down slowly, passing the table. He finally saw the letter. He read it standing with brow furrowed at first, not understanding, then with rage, then with disbelief, and finally with that look men have when they never thought something would leave them. He tore the paper up, threw it on the floor, and kicked the vase, which shattered against the wall. "You have no right," he screamed at nothing, at a woman who was no longer there to hear him. He checked the closet, opened the drawers, and discovered things were missing. Jewelry, papers, folders with the house deed, envelopes with money, everything. For the first time in his adult life, he felt fear. Not fear of losing property, but fear of losing control. He called my phone once, twice, 20 times. Always the same message. The number you dialed is not available. He tried calling people he knew. No one answered or no one wanted to speak. He even tried calling Serena, the woman he always underestimated. She did not answer, and that is when his real collapse began. For days he wandered through the house like an angry, restless ghost. He replayed my letter in his mind, twisting every word with rage. He kept telling himself I would return, that it was a moment of anger, that I couldn't live without him, that I was too old to start a new life. But each night alone, each cup of coffee he had to make for himself, each shirt he found unpressed, a slow, heavy certainty settled into his chest. This time, I was truly gone. Then he began digging for answers. He went to the bank, checked transactions, and discovered money missing. Small amounts taken over several weeks. He never noticed. He always believed I was forgetful. He never imagined I was capable of hiding anything from him. He went to Attorney Dawson and demanded answers, asking if any change had been made to the property. Dawson, uncomfortable, told him I requested a certified copy of the deed, nothing more. No transfers, no donations, nothing. "So everything is still in her name," he said, his voice tight. "Yes, everything still belongs to your mother. And if you try to sell it without her signature," Dawson added, "you have no legal right at all." That was the moment Marcus realized he had not only lost me, he had misjudged me completely. He began to question neighbors, asking if anyone had seen me, but everyone stayed silent. He even knocked on Serena's door, but no one opened. He noticed she had also been gone for days, and that made his frustration burn deeper. He started drinking, not in loud chaos, but in a quiet, hopeless way, sitting in front of the television, staring at channels he wasn't watching. Bottles emptied quietly. Food tasted like nothing. Days dragged without meaning, and inside that hollow space, he started seeing the house differently. At first, it had been his prize, a guaranteed inheritance, but now it was a silent cage. Every wall reminding him he never learned how to cook, how to wash clothes, how to live without someone lowering the noise of the television. One morning, he woke and noticed the living room covered in dust, the refrigerator empty, no coffee left, the bathroom heavy with stale smell. Then he broke down, crying. Not loud, not dramatic. It was a strangled cry, tucked behind clenched teeth, because he felt something he never thought he would feel: abandonment. And that was the real revenge. Not the papers, not the money, not the letter, but the emptiness. Me gone. The mother always present, even when he didn't deserve presence. The one who carried every insult disguised as jokes, every command disguised as concern, every cold word disguised as care. I did not abandon the house. I abandoned the burden. I walked away from the person who drained my life, and that destroyed him on the inside. Because no matter how loud he yelled, no matter how furious he became, no matter how much revenge he wanted, he could not force me. He could not make me come back. Every night, as he locked the doors, turned off the lights, and the television talked to itself, he understood a little more the meaning of my letter. A mother's presence is worth more than any money. And that presence was gone from him. We arrived at the edge of town, the sky painted deep orange. It was not a tourist spot, not full of charm, just quiet, silent, perfect for a broken woman like me to learn to breathe again. Serena turned off the car and looked at me with her expression a mix of tenderness and firmness. She said nothing. She let me take my time. I got out slowly. My legs shook, not from weakness, but because each step was a decision, each step an act of rebellion against years of emotional oppression. I crossed the threshold of the small, one-story house we rented. It had no luxuries, no ghosts. That is what I needed. The air smelled of old wood and clean surfaces, the windows open, letting in the wind. I stepped inside like a survivor on solid ground after a storm. I sat in the single dining chair and let out a low, almost hysterical laugh. Serena poured water. She sat across from me. She said, "You're here," as if it were a great achievement. "Yes," I replied, "I am here." That night I could not sleep. Not from discomfort, but because my body didn't know what to do with all the silence. No footsteps in the hallway, no sometimes with tea, sometimes with silence. She never asked me to move on. She let me be broken without it being a problem. One morning, I decided to walk alone to the lookout point. The sun was peaking, the air smelled of wet earth. I climbed slowly, step by step, feeling every muscle, every breath, my body rebuilding itself. At the top, I looked out at the world with new eyes. Thelma Price was no longer the woman who asked permission to exist. Now she was someone who had chosen to disappear from a place where she was not loved. I did not regret it. I thought about selling the house, using that money to travel, to live peacefully with Serena, to give myself the years he never let me have. And I would do it because it was mine, because for the first time, everything I had, my body, my decisions, my affections, was also mine at that moment. The wind blew hard, as if life itself were whispering to me, "You are exactly where you need to be." It was not revenge. It was not punishment. It was emotional justice. Marcus would learn, if he wanted, that a mother is not eternal, that you cannot stomp on a heart and expect it to keep beating for you. I no longer beat for him. I beat for me. Marcus did not know when he began to feel the house no longer belonged to him. At first, he pretended it was temporary. He told himself I was overreacting, that I needed time to calm down, that I would come back as soon as I got over my foolishness. But as the days passed and I did not return, the silence multiplied in the corners. It was no longer simply an absence, it was a sentence. The kitchen woke up cold. There was no smell of coffee. No one opened the windows. Dust began to settle like a guest who knew he would not be expelled. The house without my presence became inhospitable to him. And for Marcus, that was incomprehensible, because all his life he had seen me as a useful piece of furniture, an extension of the house, a kind of entity without will that served without question. He did not understand that the soul of that home was me, and when I left, I took it with me. Serena watched me in silence every morning. She knew that something inside me was reordering itself. We did not talk much about Marcus, but we both knew he was trying to track my shadow. He did it through missed calls, messages I never answered, and rumors that reached me like distant echoes. He had gone to the bank, to the notary, even to a distant cousin's house, hoping someone knew about me. But I remained invisible, not out of fear, but out of dignity. One random afternoon, while walking with Serena through the local market, I saw an indoor plant I had always liked, an intertwined ivy with strong green leaves. I bought it without thinking. When we got home, I placed it on a shelf by the window where the sun hit it in the morning. I surprised myself talking to it as I arranged it. You are going to be fine here. I am too. That night, I dreamed of Marcus, but he was not the rude, authoritarian man who yelled that I was ruining everything. He was a child. He was crying in an empty bedroom, surrounded by broken toys, asking why I had left him. I woke up with a mix of guilt and liberation, because even though I had left him alone, it was also true that he had left me alone for years. The days followed, and with them came more news of his deterioration. A mutual acquaintance, the husband of a neighbor who still kept in touch with him, told me that Marcus no longer went to work, that he lived locked up, bad-tempered, yelling on the phone at anyone who dared to mention me, that he had started drinking, that once they even found him asleep on the couch, surrounded by bottles, with the television on playing a cooking show, the same one I used to watch every afternoon. His arrogance had begun to crumble. Without me, he had no one to blame for his frustration. There was no one to demand solutions from. There was no one to humiliate, to feel bigger. And for the first time, he had to inhabit himself, and he did not know how. I received a handwritten letter. It had no return address, but I recognized the handwriting. It was from him, a clumsy attempt at an apology mixed with pleas and manipulation disguised as concern. He said things like, "I do not understand why you did it this way. We could have talked about it. I am suffering too." Not a single line said, "I mistreated you. I invalidated you. I hurt you." Not a hint of true introspection, only a chain of phrases meant to pull me back into his orbit. I tore the letter into small pieces. I burned it in the sink and watched the ashes dissolve into the air. It was the first time in years I felt real relief. I did not need his approval or his forgiveness. He had no power over me, not even with his words. Meanwhile, the sale of the house moved forward. The real estate agent, a kind man in his 50s, asked me several times if I was sure, because it was a valuable property and I could rent it out or come back someday. But every time I thought about it, I saw one image: me hunched in a corner, listening to Marcus yell while he broke plates and said nobody lived for free. That house was not a home. It was a wound with a roof. So I decided to sell it. I made the decision without ceremony. I simply signed the papers and asked that all the money be transferred to a new account only I could access. Serena came with me to the bank. She did not speak. She just held my hand while we waited. And that simple gesture gave me more strength than 1,000 speeches. With that money, I did not plan to buy another house. I did not need possessions. I planned to live, to visit the places I always dreamed of and never saw. Maybe Italy, maybe Oaxaca. I wanted to learn to dance, to swim without fear, to laugh without asking permission. But above all, I wanted Marcus to know that I had sold everything, that nothing was left, that the house he believed he would inherit now belonged to another family, that every tile, every door, every piece of furniture was no longer his because he never cared for them, because he believed that deserving was enough. They told me that when he found out, he went wild, that he went to the house to try to stop the sale, but it was already empty. The new owners had painted the walls and thrown out the old furniture. There was no trace of my life left. He stood in the yard shouting my name like an angry child whose toy had been taken. He called my phone, but I had already changed my number. He wrote emails that bounced back. He searched me the way someone searches for a ghost, because that is what he was to me now, a phantom who had left, taking the very air with her. One evening, Serena prepared a special dinner for me, with shrimp and grits, homemade bread, and sweet wine. We toasted to what was lost, to what I would never carry again, to what I had finally released. That night, as I listened to her talk about her plans to open a small embroidery workshop, I realized that not everything broken had to hurt. Some cracks were paths to the light. Marcus would keep searching for me, not because he loved me, but because he did not know how to live without someone to dominate. And I refused to be that for anyone, ever. I never felt the air so light as the morning I woke up in Savannah, Georgia. I woke without fear, without the weight in my chest that had lived there for years. For the first time in a long time, I heard no voices demanding anything. I felt no heavy footsteps in the hallway. I was not afraid to open my eyes. I opened the window and let the sun touch my face. It felt soft, almost like a blessing, warm like a new caress. I took a deep breath. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally knew a new life had begun. My own. Serena had already left for the market early. She left me a note in blue ink on the table. Today, I am bringing buttermilk biscuits and good coffee, I promise. I smiled not because of the biscuits or the coffee. I smiled because someone thought of me with kindness. And after a lifetime of silence and orders, that is worth more than any treasure. The days passed slowly, as they must when one is healing. I learned to walk slowly, to stop in front of trees, to look at the sky without worrying about the clock. Serena taught me to swim again, not in the sea, but in life. She let me take naps, put on music from her youth. We cooked together. Sometimes we cried too, but with that kind of cry that cleanses, not the kind that drowns. Not everything was easy. I discovered broken parts of me I didn't know existed. Sometimes I found myself. I now slept with the doors open, walked without looking back every time I had coffee with Serena on the terrace. Every time I felt the wind play with my gray hair, I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. One sunset, I wrote a letter, not to send it to him, but to free myself. Marcus, you were not born bad. You were born mine, and that hurt me most. Because at some point I believed you would love me with the same strength I protected you. But it was not so. You treated me like old furniture. You saw me as a burden. You wanted to lock me away. You spoke to me with contempt. Yet it was hard to let go, but I did. You owe me nothing. I owe you nothing. My debt was to myself, and I have paid it. Do not worry about my will. Everything is resolved. You will receive nothing, but I leave you something that weighs more than an inheritance. The silence of a mother who left without resentment, but also without looking back. Hopefully, one day, if life shakes you hard, you will remember this. No money can replace a living mother. I am no longer there, and I will not return. Thelma. I put the letter in a box and buried it near the garden of the house I shared with Serena, not to hide it, but like someone burying a life she no longer wants to carry. Months later, I met new people, women who had also fled similar stories, women who learned late to say no. We gathered for tea, walked along the shore, and told each other secrets like big girls. We laughed, we cried, and above all, we supported each other. One of them, Estelle, told me one afternoon, "Thelma, you're brave." I laughed. "No, Estelle, I'm just tired of not being." And she was right. I did not become rich or famous. I did not open a foundation. I did not write books. I did not do anything extraordinary except the most difficult thing: to live without guilt. I learned to dance alone, to eat without hurry, to look in the mirror without searching for flaws, to listen to my own voice and trust it, to sleep with a calm heart. And at my age, that is a revolution. I no longer wonder what would have happened if Marcus had loved me differently, because I understood that love, if begged for, becomes a prison. Today, I walk lightly. Today, I am not afraid. Today, I know that I was a mother, but I am also a woman. And above all, I am free. Because one day, I was forced to choose between the facility and obedience. And I, without saying a word, chose silence and then chose life. I sold everything, not for revenge, but to remind him and myself that a mother's presence is worth more than any money. And if he ever hears my name, let it not be for what I gave, but for what I was no longer willing to lose. Thelma Price, woman, mother, and now owner of herself.